You can hear all my audiobooks, including those not shared on YouTube, by following the links below at Gumroad and Patreon. Thank you for your support. The Governance of China, Volume 4, by Xi Jinping. Part 19, Global Governance and Multilateralism. Stay true to multilateralism and contribute to world prosperity. Part of the speech at the 12th BRICS Summit, November 17, 2020. Across the world, COVID-19 is posing a grave threat to people's lives and health. The global public health system is facing a severe test. Human society is experiencing the most serious pandemic in the past century. International trade and investment have shrunk considerably. The flow of people and goods is impeded. Uncertainty and instability are mounting. The world economy has been hit by the worst recession since the Great Depression in the 1930s. Unilateralism, protectionism, and abuse of the weak by the strong have intensified, and the deficit in governance, trust, and development and peace is growing. Despite all these challenges, we remain convinced that the underlying trend of our times, peace and development, has not changed, and that the trend towards multipolarity and economic globalization is irreversible. We must keep people's well-being close to our hearts and strive to build a global community of shared future. With concrete actions, we can make the world a better place for everyone. First, we need to stay true to multilateralism and safeguard global peace and stability. History teaches us that multilateralism, equity, and justice will keep war and conflict at bay, while unilateralism and power politics can only foment dispute and exacerbate confrontation, flouting rules and laws, pursuing unilateralism, abusing the weak, and withdrawing from international organizations and agreements, run counter to the will of the people of the world and trample on the legitimate rights and dignity of all countries. Facing the choice between multilateralism and unilateralism and between justice and hegemony, we BRICS countries must stand up for equity and justice. We must uphold multilateralism and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. We must endeavor to safeguard the UN-centered international system and the international order underpinned by international law. It is important that countries rise above ideology and respect each other's choice of social system, economic model, and a development path that suit their national conditions. We should pursue common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security. We should address differences through consultation and negotiation. We should oppose interference in others' internal affairs, unilateral sanctions, and overreach in cross-border jurisdiction. With concerted efforts, we can foster a peaceful and stable environment for development. Second, we should reinforce solidarity and coordination and meet the COVID-19 challenge together. COVID-19 is still wreaking havoc in many places, and waves of infection are resurging. Securing a global victory against the pandemic remains a daunting challenge. Close to 1 year into the battle, many countries have gained valuable experience in pandemic containment and made encouraging advances in drugs and vaccine research and development. Our fight over these past months demonstrates that as long as we stand in unity and follow the guidance of science, we can stem the spread of the virus and minimize its impact. We should put people's lives and health first, pool all available resources, and do everything we can to protect people's safety and well-being. We should step up international coordination and response and share information and epidemic control experience to stop the transmission of the virus. We should also support the WHO's crucial leadership role in this endeavor. As I speak, Chinese companies are working with their Russian and Brazilian partners on Phase 3 clinical trials of vaccines, and we are prepared to cooperate with South Africa and India as well. China has joined the COVAX facility, a platform on which we will share vaccines with other countries, developing countries in particular. We will actively consider providing vaccines to BRICS countries when the need arises. To support the development of the BRICS Vaccine R&D Center, China has set up its national center. We will work with other BRICS countries, both online and offline, to advance collective vaccine research and trials, build plants, authorize production, and recognize each other's standards. I propose that we convene a BRICS symposium on traditional medicine to explore its role in COVID-19 prevention and treatment. This will boost the global arsenal against COVID-19. Recent events have shown that politicization, stigmatization, blame shifting, and scapegoating only serve to disrupt overall global cooperation in the fight against the virus. We need to eliminate division through unity, replace bias with reasoning, and stamp out the politicization of the virus. By doing so, we will build a powerful global synergy to beat the virus. Third, we need to remain open, encourage innovation, and promote global economic recovery. The International Monetary Fund predicts that the world economy will shrink by 4.4% this year, and that emerging markets and developing countries will experience negative growth for the first time in 60 years. To stabilize the economy while responding to the pandemic is a pressing task facing all countries. While ensuring safety, we need to promote economic recovery and carry out economic and social activities in an orderly manner as we carry out virus control as part of our regular work. To resume business activities and pursue economic recovery in our countries, we need to strengthen macroeconomic policy coordination, facilitate cross-border flows of people and goods, and keep industrial and supply chains reliable and unimpeded. Those who exploit the pandemic in pursuit of deglobalization or clamor for economic decoupling or parallel systems will only end up hurting their own interests and the common interests of all. Now, more than ever, we need to stand firm for building an open world economy. We need to uphold the multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core and reject protectionism under the pretext of so-called national security. We need to begin with new business forms and models triggered by the pandemic, strengthen cooperation in scientific and technological innovation, and nurture an open, fair, equitable, and non-discriminatory business environment. This will enable us to achieve common development of greater resilience and higher quality. China will work with you to accelerate the establishment of the BRICS Partnership on New Industrial Revolution. We will open in Xiamen, Fujian Province, an innovation center of the partnership to advance cooperation in policy coordination, personnel training, and project development, and our fellow BRICS countries are welcome to join us. Not long ago, China launched a global initiative on data security, which aims to foster a peaceful, secure, open, cooperative, and orderly cyberspace to enable sound growth of the digital economy. We hope our fellow BRICS countries will support this initiative. Fourth, we need to prioritize people's well-being in our efforts for global sustainable development. Development holds the key to resolving all problems. All our efforts, whether eliminating the impact of COVID-19, getting back to a normal life, or ending conflicts and humanitarian crises, ultimately depend on people-centered development. According to a World Bank forecast, global per capita income will drop 3.6% this year, and 88 million to 115 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty by the pandemic. COVID-19 is a challenge we must face head-on. We should call on the international community to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a top priority in international cooperation. Poverty eradication must be our primary goal, and more resources must be channeled to poverty reduction, education, public health, and infrastructure. We need to support the UN in playing a coordinating role and foster an equality-based global partnership for more balanced development so that the fruits will be shared by more developing countries and the needs of underprivileged groups will be better addressed. Fifth, we need to pursue green and low-carbon development and promote harmony between humanity and nature. Global warming will not stop just because of COVID-19. To respond to climate change, we must never relax our efforts. We need to implement the Paris Agreement in good faith, stick to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, and provide more help to developing countries, particularly the small island developing states. China is ready to assume its international responsibilities as far as its current level of development permits, and will continue to make every effort to address climate change. I recently announced at the UN China's initiative to scale up our nationally determined contributions and adopt more forceful policies and measures to achieve peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and carbon neutrality before 2060. China will keep its promise. Light up our way forward with multilateralism. Special address at the World Economic Forum virtual event of the Davos Agenda. January 25th, 2021. Professor Klaus Schwab. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, the past year was marked by the sudden attack of the COVID-19 pandemic. Global public health faced a severe threat, and the world economy was mired in deep recession. Humanity encountered multiple crises on a scale unseen in history. The past year also witnessed the enormous resolve and courage of people around the world in battling the deadly coronavirus. Guided by science, reason, and a humanitarian spirit, the world has achieved initial progress in fighting COVID-19. That said, the pandemic is far from over. The recent resurgence in COVID cases reminds us that we must carry on the fight. Yet we remain convinced that winter cannot stop the arrival of spring, and darkness can never shroud the light of dawn. There is no doubt that humanity will prevail over the virus and emerge even stronger from this disaster. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, time moves on and the world will not go back to what it was. Every choice and move we make today will shape the world of the future. It is therefore important that we properly address the following 4 topics of our time. The first is to step up macroeconomic policy coordination and jointly promote strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth of the world economy. We are going through the worst recession since the end of World War II. For the first time in history, the economies of all regions have been hit hard at the same time, with global industrial and supply chains disrupted and trade and investment stagnating. Despite the trillions of dollars in relief packages worldwide, the global recovery is unstable and the outlook remains uncertain. We need to focus on current priorities and balance COVID response and economic development. Macroeconomic policy support should be stepped up to bring the global economy back on track as early as possible. More importantly, we need to look beyond the horizon and strengthen our will and resolve for change. We need to shift the driving forces and growth models of the global economy and improve its structure so as to set the course for long-term sound and steady development. The second is to abandon ideological prejudice and jointly follow a path of peaceful coexistence, mutual benefit, and win-win cooperation. No 2 leaves in the world are identical. The same holds true for our histories, cultures, and social systems. Each country is unique with its own history, culture, and social system, and none is superior to others. What is important is whether a country's social system fits its national conditions, enjoys public endorsement and support, serves to deliver political stability, social progress, and better lives, and contributes to human progress. The differences in our histories, cultures, and systems are as old as human societies themselves. They are the intrinsic characteristics of human civilization. which would have long perished without diversity. Diversity is an objective reality, and this will not change. Difference in itself is no cause for concern. What does sound the alarm is arrogance, prejudice, and hatred. It is the attempt to impose a hierarchy on human civilization or force one's own historical experience, culture, and social system upon others. All countries should pursue peaceful coexistence on the basis of mutual respect, seek common ground while shelving differences, and promote exchanges and mutual learning. This will give impetus to the development of human civilization. The third is to close the divide between developed and developing countries and jointly bring about growth and prosperity for all. Today, inequality continues to grow, the North-South gap remains unbridged, and sustainable development faces severe challenges. As countries grapple with the pandemic, their economic recovery is following divergent trajectories, and there is a risk that the North-South gap will widen further or even be perpetuated. Developing countries are aspiring to obtain more resources and space for development, and they are calling for stronger representation and a louder voice in global economic governance. We should recognize that the growth of developing countries will put global prosperity and stability on a more solid footing, and developed countries will stand to benefit from such growth. The international community should keep its eye on the long term, honor its commitments, provide necessary support to developing countries, and safeguard their legitimate development interests. Equal rights, equal opportunities, and equal rules should be strengthened so that all countries will benefit from the opportunities and fruits of development. The fourth is to come together against global challenges and jointly create a better future for humanity. In this era of economic globalization, public health emergencies like COVID-19 may very well recur, and global public health governance needs to be reinforced. The Earth is our one and only home. The future of humanity depends on our scaling up efforts to address climate change and promote sustainable development. No global problem can be solved by any one country alone. There must be global action, global response, and global cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, the problems confronting the world are intricate and complex. Their solutions will come through upholding multilateralism and building a global community of shared future. We should stay committed to openness and inclusiveness and avoid closure and exclusion. Multilateralism is about having international affairs addressed through consultation and the future of the world decided by everyone working together. To create exclusive circles or start a new Cold War, to reject, threaten, or intimidate others, to grant one's self the right to engage in arbitrary decoupling, supply disruption, or sanctions, and to create isolation or estrangement will only push the world into division and eventual confrontation. We cannot tackle common challenges in a divided world, and confrontation will lead us nowhere. Humanity has learned the lesson the hard way, and that history is not long gone. We must not return to the path of the past. The right approach is to act on the vision of a global community of shared future. We should uphold the common values of humanity, peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom, rise above ideological prejudice, make the mechanisms, principles, and policies of our cooperation as open and inclusive as possible, and jointly safeguard world peace and stability. We should build an open world economy, uphold the multilateral trading system, discard discriminatory and exclusionary standards, rules, and systems, and break down barriers to trade, investment, and exchanges of technology. We should strengthen the G20 as the premier forum for global economic governance, engage in closer macroeconomic policy coordination, and keep the global industrial and supply chains open and stable. We should ensure the sound operation of the global financial system, promote structural reform, and expand global aggregate demand in an effort to strive for higher quality and stronger resilience in global economic development. We should stay committed to international law and international rules instead of seeking supremacy. The ancient Chinese believed that the law is the very foundation of governance. Footnote 1. Xunzi. End of footnote 1. International governance should be based on rules agreed and consensus reached by all, not on the order imposed by one or the few. The Charter of the United Nations provides the basic and universally recognized norms governing state-to-state relations. Without international law and international rules that are formed and recognized by the global community, the world may return to the law of the jungle, and the consequence would be devastating for humanity. We need to be resolute in championing the international rule of law and steadfast in our resolve to safeguard the international system centered on the UN and the international order based on international law. Multilateral institutions provide the platforms for putting multilateralism into action, and they are the basic architecture underpinning multilateralism. Their authority and effectiveness should be respected and safeguarded. State-to-state relations should be coordinated and regulated through proper institutions and rules. The strong should not abuse the weak. Decisions should not be forced through by a display of strong muscles or by waving a big fist. Multilateralism should not be used as a pretext for acts of unilateralism. Principles should be observed, and rules once made should be followed by all. Selective multilateralism should not be an option. We should stay committed to consultation and cooperation rather than conflict and confrontation. Differences in history, culture, and social systems should not be an excuse for antagonism or confrontation, but rather an incentive for cooperation. We should respect and accommodate differences, avoid meddling in other countries' internal affairs, and resolve disagreements through consultation and dialogue. History and our experience have made it clear time and again that the misguided approach of antagonism and confrontation, be it in the form of Cold War, Hot War, Trade War, or Tech War, will eventually hurt all countries' interests and undermine everyone's well-being. We should reject the outdated Cold War and zero-sum game mentality, adhere to mutual respect and mutual accommodation, and reinforce political trust through strategic communication. It is important that we stick to the cooperation concept based on mutual benefit. Say no to narrow-minded, selfish, beggar-thy-neighbor policies, and stop the practice of keeping to oneself all advantages gained in development. Equal rights to development should be guaranteed for all countries to promote common development and prosperity. We should advocate fair competition, like competing with each other for excellence on a racing track, not attacking each other in a life-or-death fight. We should stay committed to keeping up with the times. The world is undergoing change on a scale unseen in a century, and now is the time for major development and major transformation. To uphold multilateralism in the 21st century, we should promote its best traditions, take on new perspectives, and look to the future. We must stand by the core values and basic principles of multilateralism. We should also adapt to the changing international landscape, respond to global challenges as they arise, and reform and improve the system of global governance on the basis of extensive consultation and building consensus. We must give full play to the role of the World Health Organization in building a global community of health for all. We should advance reform of the World Trade Organization and the international financial and monetary system in a way that boosts global economic growth and protects the development rights and interests and opportunities of developing countries. We should adopt a people-centered and facts-based approach. When we make policies and develop international rules on global digital governance, we should deliver on the Paris Agreement on climate change and promote green development. We should continuously prioritize development, implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and see that all countries, especially developing ones, are able to enjoy the fruits of global development. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, After decades of strenuous effort by all its people, China is on course to finish building a moderately prosperous society in all respects. We have achieved historic gains in ending extreme poverty and have embarked on a new journey towards building a modern socialist country. As China enters a new development stage, we will follow a new development philosophy and create a double development dynamic with the domestic economy as the mainstay and the domestic economy and international engagement providing mutual reinforcement. China will work with other countries to build an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world that enjoys lasting peace, universal security, and common prosperity. China will continue to take an active part in international cooperation on COVID-19. Containing the coronavirus is the most pressing task for the international community. This is because people and lives must always come before anything else. It is also what it takes to stabilize and revive the economy. Greater solidarity, closer cooperation, more information sharing, and a stronger global response are what we need to defeat COVID-19 across the world. It is especially important to scale up cooperation on the R&D, production, and distribution of vaccines and make them a public good that is easily accessible and affordable for people in all countries. To date, China has provided assistance to over 150 countries and 13 international organizations and sent 36 teams of health and medical experts to countries in need. China is strongly supportive of and actively engaged in international cooperation on COVID vaccines. China will continue to share its experience with other countries, do its best to assist countries and regions that are less prepared for the pandemic, and work to make COVID vaccines more accessible and affordable in developing countries. We hope these efforts will contribute to an early and complete victory over the coronavirus throughout the world. China will continue to implement a win-win strategy of opening up. Economic globalization meets the requirements of growing social productivity and is a natural outcome of scientific and technological progress. It serves no one's interest to use the pandemic as a pretext to reverse globalization in favor of seclusion and decoupling. As a long-standing supporter of economic globalization, China is committed to following through on its fundamental policy of opening up. China will continue to liberalize and facilitate trade and investment, help keep global industrial and supply chains smooth and stable, and advance high-quality belt and road cooperation. China will promote institutional opening up that covers rules, regulations, management, and standards. We will foster a business environment that is based on market principles and governed by law, and meets international standards, and we will unleash the potential of the huge China market and enormous domestic demand. We hope these efforts will bring more cooperation opportunities to other countries and add further impetus to global economic recovery and growth. China will continue to promote sustainable development. China will implement in full the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We will do more on the eco-environmental front by transforming and improving our industrial structure and energy mix at a faster pace and promoting green, low-carbon ways of life and work. I have announced China's goals to achieve peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and carbon neutrality before 2060. We must make a tremendous effort to meet these targets. We always believe that when the interests of the whole of humanity are at stake, China must step forward, take action, and get the job done. China is already drawing up action plans and taking specific measures to make sure we meet the set targets. We are doing this as a concrete action to uphold multilateralism and as a contribution to protecting our shared home and realizing sustainable development. China will continue to advance science, technology, and innovation. Science, technology, and innovation are the key engines for human progress. They are a powerful weapon to overcome many global challenges, and they provide the only way for China to foster the new development dynamic and achieve high-quality development. China will invest more in science and technology, develop an enabling system for innovation as a priority, turn breakthroughs in science and technology into productive forces at a faster pace, and strengthen protection of intellectual property rights, all with the goal of fostering innovation-driven higher quality growth. Scientific and technological advances should benefit all of humanity rather than be used to curb and contain the development of other countries. China will be more open in its thinking and actions with regard to international exchanges and cooperation on science and technology. We will work with other countries to create an open, fair, equitable, and non-discriminatory environment for scientific and technological progress that is beneficial to all and shared by all. China will continue to promote a new model of international relations. The Chinese people do not believe in the zero-sum game or winner-takes-all thinking. As a staunch follower of an independent foreign policy of peace, China is working hard to bridge the differences through dialogue and resolve disputes through negotiation, and to pursue friendly and cooperative relations with other countries on the basis of equality, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. As a steadfast member of the developing world, China will further expand South-South cooperation and contribute to the efforts of other developing countries to eradicate poverty, ease their debt burden, and achieve more growth. China will become more actively engaged in global economic governance and push for an economic globalization that is more open, inclusive, balanced, and beneficial to all. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, there is only one Earth and one shared future for humanity. As we deal with the current crises and endeavor to make a better day for everyone, we need to stand united and work together. History demonstrates time and again that to beggar thy neighbor to go it alone or to slip into arrogant isolation will always fail. Let us all join hands and let multilateralism light our way towards a global community of shared future. Thank you. Increase confidence and overcome difficulties to build a better world. Speech at the General Debate of the 76th Session of the United Nations General Assembly, September 21st, 2021. Mr. President, the year 2021 is a truly remarkable one for the Chinese people. It marks the centenary of the Communist Party of China. It is also the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations UN, a historic event which will be solemnly commemorated by China. We will continue our active efforts to raise China's cooperation with the UN to a new level and make new and greater contributions to advancing the noble cause of the UN. Mr. President, a year ago, global leaders attended the high-level meetings marking the 75th anniversary of the UN and issued a declaration pledging to fight COVID-19 in solidarity, tackle challenges together, uphold multilateralism, strengthen the role of the UN, and work for the common future of present and future generations. 1 year on, our world is facing the impact of change on a scale unseen in a century. Together with the COVID-19 pandemic, in all countries, people long for peace and development more than ever before. Their call for equity and justice is growing stronger, and they are more determined to pursue win-win cooperation right now. COVID-19 is still raging around the world, and profound changes are taking place in human society. The world has entered a new period of turbulence and transformation. It falls on each and every responsible political leader to answer the questions of our times and make a historic choice with confidence, courage, and a sense of mission. First, we must beat COVID-19 and win this decisive fight that is crucial to the future of humanity. The history of world civilization is also one of fighting pandemics. Rising to the challenge, humanity has always triumphed and achieved greater development and progress. The current pandemic may appear overwhelming, but we will surely overcome it and prevail. We should always put people in their lives first and care about the life, value, and dignity of every individual. We need a spirit, an attitude, and an approach of scientific inquiry to coordinate regular and targeted epidemic prevention and control with emergency response and coordinate epidemic prevention and control with economic and social development. We need to reinforce the coordinated global COVID-19 response and to minimize the risk of cross-border virus transmission. Vaccination is our powerful weapon against COVID-19. I have emphasized on many occasions the need to make vaccines a global public good and ensure vaccine accessibility and affordability in developing countries. Of pressing urgency is to ensure a fair and equitable distribution of vaccines globally. China will do its best to provide a total of 2 billion doses of vaccine to the world by the end of this year. In addition to donating U.S. $100 million to COVAX, China will donate 100 million doses of vaccine to other developing countries in the course of this year. China will continue to support and engage in global science-based tracing of COVID-19 origins and stand firmly opposed to political maneuvering in whatever form. Second, we must revitalize the economy and pursue more robust, greener, and more balanced global development. Development holds the key to human well-being. Facing the severe shock of COVID-19, we need to work together to steer global development towards a new stage of balanced, coordinated, and inclusive growth. To this end, I would like to propose a global development initiative. Committed to development as a priority, we need to put development high on the global macro policy agenda, strengthen policy coordination among major economies, and ensure policy continuity, consistency, and sustainability. We need to foster global development partnerships that are more equal and balanced, forge greater synergy among multilateral development cooperation processes, and speed up the development of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Committed to a people-centered approach, we should safeguard and improve people's livelihoods and protect and promote human rights through development and make sure that development is for the people and by the people, and that its fruits are shared among all the people. We should continue our work so that the people will have a greater sense of gain, fulfillment, and security, and achieve well-rounded development. Committed to benefits for all, we should direct our attention to the special needs of developing countries. We may employ such means as debt suspension and development aid to help developing countries, particularly vulnerable countries, facing exceptional difficulties, with the emphasis on addressing imbalanced and insufficient development between and within countries. Committed to innovation-driven development, we need to seize the historic opportunities created by the new revolution in science, technology, and industry, redouble our efforts to harness technological achievements to boost productivity and foster an open, fair, equitable, and non-discriminatory environment for the development of science and technology. We should foster new drivers of economic growth in the post-COVID era and jointly pursue leapfrog development. Committed to harmony between humanity and nature, we need to improve global environmental governance, actively respond to climate change, and create a community of life for humanity and nature. We need to accelerate the transition to a green and low-carbon economy and achieve green recovery and development. China will strive to achieve peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and carbon neutrality before 2060. This requires tremendous hard work, and we will make every effort to meet these goals. China will step up support for other developing countries in developing green and low-carbon energy and will not build new coal-fired power projects abroad. Committed to results-oriented actions, we need to increase input and financing in development and prioritize cooperation in areas such as poverty reduction, food security, COVID-19 response and vaccines, climate change, green development, industrialization, the digital economy, and connectivity. We must also accelerate implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development so as to build a global community of shared development. China has pledged an additional U.S. $3 billion of international assistance in the next 3 years to support other developing countries in responding to COVID-19 and promoting economic and social recovery. Third, We must strengthen solidarity and promote mutual respect and win-win cooperation in international relations. A world of peace and development should embrace civilizations of all forms and must accommodate diverse paths to modernization. Democracy is not a special right reserved to individual countries, but a right for the people of all countries to enjoy. Recent developments in the world show once again that external military intervention and so-called democratic transformation lead to nothing but harm. We need to advocate peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom, which are the common values of humanity, and reject any leaning towards exclusive circles or zero-sum games. Differences and problems among countries are hardly avoidable, and they need to be handled through dialogue and cooperation on the basis of equality and mutual respect. One country's success does not have to come at the expense of another's failure, and the world is big enough to accommodate common development and progress among all countries. We need to pursue dialogue and inclusiveness rather than confrontation and exclusion. We need to build a new model of international relations based on mutual respect, equity, justice, and win-win cooperation, and do the best we can to expand the convergence of our interests and achieve the greatest synergy possible. The Chinese people have always celebrated peace, amity, and harmony, and have striven to pursue that vision. China has never invaded or abused others or sought hegemony, and will never do so. China has consistently been a builder of world peace, a contributor to global development, a defender of the international order, and a provider of public goods. And China will continue to bring the world new opportunities through its own development. Fourth, we must improve global governance and practice true multilateralism. There is only one international system in the world, the international system with the UN at its core. There is only one international order, the international order underpinned by international law. And there is only one set of rules, the basic norms governing international relations underpinned by the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. The UN should uphold true multilateralism and serve as the central platform for countries to safeguard universal security, share development achievements, and chart the future course of the world. The UN should remain committed to ensuring a stable international order, increasing the representation and say of developing countries in international affairs, and taking the lead in advancing democracy and the rule of law in international relations. The UN should seek balanced progress in the three key areas of security, developments, and human rights. It should set a common agenda, highlight pressing issues, and focus on real actions, and ensure that commitments made by all parties to multilateralism are truly delivered. Mr. President, the world is once again at a historic crossroads. I am convinced that the trend of peace, development, and progress for humanity is irresistible. Let us gird our loins, jointly address global threats and challenges, and work together to build a global community of shared future and a better world for all. Speech at the conference, marking the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations. October 25th, 2021. Your Excellency, Secretary-General Antonio Gutierrez, Your Excellencies, diplomatic envoys, and representatives of international organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, comrades. 50 years ago today, at its 26th session, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted Resolution 2758 by an overwhelming majority, and the decision was made to restore all the rights of the People's Republic of China in the United Nations, and to recognize the representatives of the government of the People's Republic of China as the only legitimate representatives of China to the United Nations. It was a victory for the Chinese people, and a victory for all the people of the world. Today, on this special date, We are gathered here to review the past and look to the future, and that makes our gathering all the more significant. The restoration of the lawful seat of the PRC in the UN was a momentous event for the world and the UN. It came as the result of a combined effort by all the peace-loving countries that stood up for justice in the world. It marked the return of the people of China, or 1/4 of the world's population, back to the UN. The event was significant and far-reaching for both China and the wider world. On this occasion, I wish to express, on behalf of the Chinese government and the Chinese people, our heartfelt gratitude to all the countries that co-sponsored and supported UN General Assembly Resolution 2758, and to pay tribute to all the countries and people who stand on the side of justice. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, comrades, the past 5 decades since the restoration of the PRC's lawful seat in the United Nations have witnessed China's peaceful development and its commitment and dedication to the well-being of all humanity. For these 50 years, the Chinese people have demonstrated an untiring spirit and kept to the right direction amid changing circumstances, writing an epic chapter in the story of China and humanity, building on achievements in national construction and development after the founding of the People's Republic. The Chinese people started a new period of reform and opening up, succeeded in founding and developing socialism with Chinese characteristics, and focused on unleashing and developing the productive forces and raising their living standards. China has achieved the historic transformation from a country with relatively backward productive forces to the world's second largest economy. Through hard work, the Chinese people have completed the goal of building a moderately prosperous society in all respects on the vast land of China, and won the battle against poverty, thus securing a historic success in eradicating absolute poverty in China. We have now embarked on a new journey towards a modern socialist country that presents brighter prospects for the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. For these 50 years, the Chinese people have stood in solidarity and cooperation with other peoples around the world and upheld international equity and justice, contributing significantly to world peace and development. The Chinese people love peace and know well the value of peace and stability. We have followed and never deviated from an independent foreign policy of peace. We have stood firm for fairness and justice and resolutely opposed hegemony and power politics. The Chinese people are strong supporters of other developing countries in their just struggle to safeguard their sovereignty, security, and development interests. The Chinese people are committed to promoting common development. From the Tazara Railway to the Belt and Road Initiative, we have done what we could to help other developing countries and have offered the world new opportunities through our own development. During the challenging times of the COVID-19 pandemic, China has shared its COVID response experience with the rest of the world without reservation, sent large quantities of supplies, vaccines, and medicines to other countries, and engaged deeply in science-based cooperation on tracing COVID-19 origins, all in a sincere and proactive effort to contribute to humanity's final victory over the pandemic. For these 50 years, the Chinese people have upheld the authority and sanctity of the UN and practiced multilateralism, and China's cooperation with the UN has steadily expanded. China has faithfully fulfilled its missions and responsibilities as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, stayed true to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, and upheld the central role of the UN in international affairs. China has all along advocated peaceful and diplomatic settlement of disputes. It has sent over 50,000 peacekeepers to UN peacekeeping operations and is now the second largest financial contributor to both the UN and its peacekeeping operations. China is among the first countries to have met the UN Millennium Development Goals. It has taken the lead in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and contributed to over 70% of global poverty reduction. China has stood by the spirit of the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and earnestly applied the universality of human rights in the Chinese context. It has blazed a path of protection and promotion of human rights that is consistent with the trend of the times and bears distinct Chinese features, thus making a major contribution to the progress of human rights in China and to the international cause of human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, comrades, the tide of the times is mighty. Those who follow it will prosper, while those who resist it will perish. Over the past 50 years, in spite of times of trouble and turmoil, the world has remained stable as a whole thanks to the concerted efforts of the peoples of all countries. The global economy has grown rapidly, and innovations in science and technology have continued to open new ground. A large number of developing countries have grown stronger. Over 1 billion people have emerged from poverty, and several billion are moving towards modernization. In the world today, change on a scale unseen in a century is accelerating, and the forces for peace, development, and progress have continued to grow. It falls upon us to follow the prevailing trend of history and to choose cooperation over confrontation, openness over isolation, and mutual benefit over zero-sum games. We must be firm in opposing all forms of hegemony and power politics, as well as all forms of unilateralism and protectionism. We should vigorously advocate peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom, which are common values of humanity, and work together to provide the right philosophy for building a better world. Peace and development are our common cause, equity and justice our common aspiration, and democracy and freedom our common goal. Our world is characterized above all by diversity. It is diversity that makes human civilization what it is. It provides us a constant source of vitality and a driving force for world development. As Liu Kai of the Qing dynasty said, "Only by learning from 100 schools of thought and drawing on their strength can one develop and establish one's own distinctive style." Footnote. Liu Kai, a discussion on literature with Sir Ruan Yuan Tai, the Deputy Secretary Advisor to the Crown Palace. Liu Kai, 1784 to 1824, was an essayist of the Qing dynasty. End of footnote. No civilization in the world is superior to others. Every civilization is special and unique to its own region. Civilizations can achieve harmony only through communication, and can make progress only through harmonization. The success of a country's path of development is judged first and foremost by whether it fits the country's conditions, whether it follows the trends of the times, whether it brings economic growth, social progress, stability, and better lives, whether it has the people's endorsement and support, and whether it contributes to human progress. We should join together to build a global community of shared future, and work together to build an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world that enjoys lasting peace, universal security, and common prosperity. The human race is an integral community, and the earth is our common homeland. No individual or country can thrive in isolation. Humanity should stand together in solidarity and pursue common development in harmony. We should keep moving towards a global community of shared future and jointly create a better tomorrow. Building a global community of shared future does not mean replacing one system or civilization with another. Rather, it is about countries with different social systems, ideologies, histories, cultures, and levels of development coming together to further shared interests, shared rights, and shared responsibilities in global affairs, and creating the greatest synergy for building a better world. We should remain committed to mutual benefit and win-win results and work together to promote economic and social development for the greater benefit of our people. As an ancient Chinese once observed, the essence of governance is livelihood, and the essence of livelihood is sufficiency. Footnote: Huainanzi. End of footnote. Development and happy lives are the common aspirations of people in all countries. Development is meaningful only when it advances people's interests and can be sustained only when it is driven by the people. Countries should put their people first and strive to realize development of greater quality, efficiency, equity, sustainability, and security. It is important to resolve the problem of imbalanced and insufficient development and make development more coordinated and inclusive. It is also important to strengthen the people's capacity for development, foster an environment where everyone takes part and has a share, and create a dynamic where the outcome of development benefits every person in every country in a fair way. Not long ago, at the 76th session of the UN General Assembly, I proposed a global development initiative in the hope that countries will work together to overcome the impact of COVID-19, accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and to build a global community of shared development. We should step up cooperation and work together to address the global challenges and issues facing humanity. The international community is confronted by regional disputes as well as global issues such as terrorism, climate change, cybersecurity, and biosecurity. Only with more inclusive global governance, more effective multilateral mechanisms, and more active regional cooperation can these issues be addressed effectively. Climate change is nature's warning to humanity. Countries need to take concrete actions to protect Mother Nature. We need to encourage green recovery, green production, and green consumption, promote healthy and positive lifestyles, foster harmony between humanity and nature, protect the eco-environment, and to make it an inexhaustible source of sustainable development. We should resolutely uphold the authority and sanctity of the UN and work together to practice true multilateralism. Building a global community of shared future requires a strong UN, calls for reform and improvement of the global governance system. Countries should uphold the international system with the UN at its core, the international order, underpinned by international law, and the basic norms of international relations based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. International rules can only be made by the 193 UN member states together and not decided by any individual country or by power blocks. International rules should be observed by the 193 UN member states, and there is no exception, and should be no exception. Countries should respect the UN, take good care of the UN family, refrain from exploiting the organization, still less abandon it for self-serving reasons, and make sure that the UN plays an ever more positive role in advancing humanity's noble cause of peace and development. China is ready to work with all countries under the principles of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits to explore new ideas and new models of cooperation, and to continue enriching the practice of multilateralism under new circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, comrades, a review of the past can light the way forward. Standing at a new historical starting point, China will stay committed to the path of peaceful development and always be a builder of world peace. China will stay committed to the path of reform and opening up and always be a contributor to global development. China will stay committed to the path of multilateralism and always be a defender of the international order. As a Chinese poem reads, green hills bathe in the same cloud and rain. The same moon lights up towns, however far away. Footnote: Wang Chongling, seen off Imperial Censor Chai. Wang Chongling, unknown to 756, was a renowned poet of the Tang Dynasty. End of footnote. Let us join hands, stand on the right side of history and the side of human progress, and work tirelessly for the lasting and peaceful development of the world, and for a global community of shared future. Thank you. Uphold openness, inclusiveness, win-win cooperation, and multilateralism. Part of the speech at Session 1 of the 16th G20 Leaders Summit. October 30th, 2021. Faced with changes and a pandemic, both on a scale unseen in a century, the G20, the premier forum for international economic cooperation, must shoulder its responsibilities, consider the future of humanity and the well-being of the people, uphold openness, inclusiveness, and win-win cooperation, practice true multilateralism, and promote the building of a global community of shared future. I would like to suggest that we work in the following 5 specific areas. First, work in solidarity to combat COVID-19. With the coronavirus ravaging the whole world, none of us can stay safe on our own. Solidarity and cooperation are the most powerful weapons. The international community must work in concert to confront and defeat the pandemic with a science-based approach. Stigmatization around the issue of the virus and politicization of the origin tracing both run counter to the spirit of solidarity against the pandemic. We need to step up cooperation on prevention, control, diagnosis, and treatment, and be more ready for major public health emergencies. The G20 includes the world's major economies and should therefore play a leading role in building consensus, mobilizing resources, and promoting cooperation. At the early stage of the pandemic, I called for COVID-19 vaccines to be made a global public good. To this end, I would like to propose here a global vaccine cooperation action initiative. 1. We need to strengthen vaccine R&D cooperation and support vaccine companies in conducting joint R&D and production with developing countries. 2. We need to uphold equity and justice and provide more vaccines to developing countries to meet the global vaccination target for 2022 as set by the World Health Organization, WHO. 3. We need to support the World Trade Organization, WTO, in making an early decision on waiving intellectual property rights on COVID-19 vaccines and encourage vaccine companies to transfer technology to developing countries. 4. We need to scale up cross-border trade cooperation to ensure smooth passage of vaccines and related raw and auxiliary materials. 5. We need to treat different vaccines equally and advance mutual recognition of vaccines in accordance with WHO's emergency use listing. 6. We need to provide financial support for global vaccine cooperation, especially for developing countries to access vaccines. To date, China has provided over 1.6 billion doses of vaccine to more than 100 countries and international organizations, and will provide over 2 billion doses to the world in the course of this year. China is conducting joint vaccine production with 16 countries with an initial capacity of 700 million doses per year. The International Forum on COVID-19 Vaccine Cooperation that I proposed in May at the Global Health Summit was held successfully in August. The participating countries reached intended agreements amounting to more than 1.5 billion doses for this year. China, together with 30 other countries, has also launched an initiative for Belt and Road Partnership on COVID-19 vaccine cooperation, calling on the international community to promote fair distribution of vaccines around the world. China is ready to work with all parties to increase vaccine accessibility and affordability in developing countries and make a positive contribution to building a global line of defense through vaccination. Second, strengthen coordination to promote recovery. COVID-19 has had a complex and far-reaching impact on the global economy. It is imperative that we apply the right prescriptions to address both symptoms and root causes of the problems we face. We should step up macroeconomic policy coordination and ensure the continuity, consistency, and sustainability of our policies. Major economies should adopt responsible macroeconomic policies, prevent their domestic measures from causing a rise in inflation, exchange rate fluctuations, or mounting debt, avoid negative fallout on developing countries, and ensure the sound functioning of the international economic and financial system. At the same time, we should take a long-term perspective, improve the global economic governance system and rules, and make up for the relevant government deficit. We should continue to push for the scheduled conclusion of the 16th General Review of Quotas of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, to buttress the global financial safety net. China supports the early launch of negotiations on the 20th replenishment process of the International Development Association and maintains that the relevant voting rights review should faithfully reflect the changes in the international economic landscape and amplify the voice of developing countries. China welcomes the IMF's decision on the new allocation of special drawing rights totaling US $650 billion and stands ready to lend the new allocation to low-income countries that are seriously affected by COVID-19. We should safeguard the multilateral trading system with the WTO at its core and to build an open world economy. The G20 should continue to provide political guidance on the reform of the WTO, uphold its core values and basic principles, and protect developing countries' rights, interests, and development space. It is imperative to restore, as quickly as possible, the normal operation of the dispute settlement mechanism and work for positive results at the 12th WTO Ministerial Conference. We should keep industrial and supply chains secure and stable and ensure the smooth functioning of the global economy. China proposes to hold an international forum on resilient and stable industrial and supply chains, and welcomes the active participation of G20 members and relevant international organizations. Infrastructure development plays an important role in propelling economic growth. China has made unremitting efforts in this regard through Belt and Road cooperation and other initiatives. China is prepared to work with all sides to uphold the principles of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefits. China will stay committed to the vision of open, green, and clean cooperation and pursue the goal of high standard and sustainable development for the benefits of the people, so as to deliver more fruitful outcomes from high-quality Belt and Road cooperation. Third, embrace inclusiveness to achieve common development. The pandemic has created multiple crises around the world and hit developing countries particularly hard. The number of people living in hunger has reached around 800 million. Implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is facing unprecedented challenges. In this context, we must take a people-centered approach and make global development more equitable, effective, and inclusive, so that no country will be left behind. The G20 should prioritize development in macro policy coordination, ensure sound implementation of the action plan on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, move forward with the initiative on supporting industrialization in Africa and least developed countries, and promote synergy among the existing mechanisms for development cooperation. Advanced economies should fulfill their pledges on official development assistance and provide more resources for developing countries. Not long ago, I proposed a global development initiative at the United Nations and called on the international community to strengthen cooperation in poverty alleviation, food security, COVID-19 response and vaccines, development, financing, climate change and green development, industrialization, the digital economy, and connectivity, so as to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and achieve more robust, greener, and more balanced global development. This initiative is closely compatible with the G20's priority goal of promoting global development. We welcome the active participation of more countries in the initiative. Fourth, pursue innovation to tap growth potential. Innovation is a decisive factor in economic and social development and in addressing common challenges to humanity. The G20 should join forces to unleash the potential for innovation-driven growth and draw up rules based on extensive participation and broad-based consensus to foster an enabling environment for innovation-driven development. Forming exclusive blocks and drawing ideological boundaries will only cause division and create more obstacles, which will do only harm to scientific and technological innovation. The digital economy is an important frontier of scientific and technological innovation. The G20 should shoulder its responsibilities in the digital era, accelerate the development of new types of digital infrastructure, promote deeper integration of digital technologies with the real economy, and help developing countries eliminate the digital divide. China has proposed the Global Initiative on Data Security. We may discuss and develop international rules for digital governance that reflect the will and respect the interests of all sides, and actively foster an open, fair, just, and non-discriminatory environment for digital development. China attaches great importance to international cooperation on the digital economy and has decided to apply to join the Digital Economic Partnership Agreement. China stands ready to work with all parties for the healthy and orderly development of the digital economy. Fifth, promote harmonious coexistence to achieve green and sustainable development. The G20 must uphold the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. It must push for the full implementation of the Paris Agreement on climate change and support a successful COP26 of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and a fruitful COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Developed countries must lead by example on emissions reduction, fully accommodate the special difficulties and concerns of developing countries, deliver on their commitments in climate financing, and provide technology, capacity building, and other support for developing countries. This is critical to the success of the upcoming COP26. China has all along undertaken the international responsibilities commensurate with its national conditions. We have actively advanced the green transition of our economy and raised the targets of our climate actions on our own initiative. In the past 10 years, China has phased out 120 million kilowatts of installed coal-fired power generation capacity, the construction of a first batch of wind and photovoltaic power stations with a total installed capacity of about 100 million kilowatts has proceeded according to schedule. China will strive to achieve peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and carbon neutrality before 2060. We will honor our words with actions and work with all countries to pursue a path of green, low carbon, and sustainable development. Create a better post-COVID world. Part of the speech at a virtual session of the 2022 World Economic Forum, January 17, 2022. The world today is undergoing change on a scale unseen in a century. This process, not limited to a particular moment, event, country, or region, highlights the profound and sweeping changes of our times. As they combine with a once-in-a-century pandemic, the world finds itself in a new period of turbulence and transformation. How do we beat the pandemic and build the post-COVID world? These are major issues of common concern to people throughout the world. They are also urgent questions to which we must provide answers. As a Song Dynasty philosopher observed, the momentum of the world either flourishes or declines. The governance of the world either progresses or regresses. Footnote. Liu Zuqian. Essays on Zhuo's commentary on the Spring and Autumn Annals. Liu Zuqian, 1137 to 1181, was a writer and Neo-Confucian philosopher of the Southern Song Dynasty. End of footnote. The world is always developing through the interplay of opposites. Without this interplay, nothing would exist. The history of humanity is one of achieving growth by meeting various tests and of developing by resolving various crises. We need to move forward by following the logic of history and develop by keeping pace with the trend of our times. Whatever the trials and tribulations, humanity will move on. We need to learn by comparing and analyzing long cycles of history and see the change in things through the subtle and the minute. We need to foster new opportunities amid crises, open up new horizons on a shifting landscape, and pool great strengths to overcome difficulties and challenges. First, We need to embrace cooperation and jointly defeat the pandemic. Confronted by this unprecedented pandemic, which is going to significantly affect the future of humanity, the international community has fought a tenacious battle. Reality has once again proved that amid the raging torrents of a global crisis, countries are not riding separately in some 190 small boats, but are rather all in a giant ship on which our shared destiny depends. Small boats cannot survive a storm, but a giant ship is strong enough to withstand it. Thanks to the concerted efforts of the international community, marked progress has been made in the global battle against the pandemic. This said, the pandemic is proving a stubborn opponent, resurging with more variants and spreading faster than before. It poses a serious threat to public safety and health and is exerting a profound impact on the global economy. Strong confidence and cooperation represent the only way to defeat the pandemic. Hindering each other's efforts or casting around for targets to blame only causes needless delay in our response and distracts us from the overall objective. Countries need to strengthen international cooperation against COVID-19, carry out joint research and development of medicines, build multiple lines of defense against the coronavirus, and speed up efforts to build a global community of health for all. Of particular importance is to fully leverage vaccines as a powerful weapon, ensure their equitable distribution, accelerate the vaccination process, and close the global immunization gap so as to truly safeguard people's lives, health, and livelihoods. China is a country that delivers on its promises. China has already sent over 2 billion doses of vaccine to more than 120 countries and international organizations, and China will provide a further 1 billion doses to African countries, including 600 million donated doses, and will also donate 150 million doses to ASEAN countries. Second, we need to address a number of risks and promote a steady recovery of the global economy. The global economy is emerging from the trough, and yet it is still subject to many constraints. Global industrial and supply chains have been disrupted. Commodity prices continue to rise, energy supply remains tight. These and other stresses compound one another and heighten uncertainty about economic recovery. The low inflation environment has changed considerably, and the risk of rising inflation driven by multiple factors is surfacing. If major economies slam on the brakes or take a sudden turn in their monetary policies, there will be serious negative spillovers. They will present a threat to global economic and financial stability, and developing countries will bear the brunt. In responding to the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, we need to explore new drivers of economic growth, new social models, and new pathways for people-to-people exchange in a bid to facilitate cross-border trade. Keep industrial and supply chains secure and smooth, and promote steady and solid progress in global economic recovery. Economic globalization is the trend of the times. Though countercurrents are sure to exist in a river, none can stop it from flowing to the sea. The weight of the water boosts the river's momentum, and eddies of resistance may yet strengthen its overall flow. Despite the countercurrents and dangerous shoals along the way, economic globalization has never veered off course and never will. All countries should uphold true multilateralism, should remove barriers, not erect walls. We should open up, not close down. We should seek integration, not decoupling. This is the way to build an open world economy. We should guide reform of the global governance system in accordance with the principles of fairness and justice, and uphold the multilateral trading system with the World Trade Organization at its center. We should establish generally accepted and effective rules for artificial intelligence and the digital economy on the basis of full consultation, and create an open, just, and non-discriminatory environment for scientific and technological innovation. This is the way to make economic globalization more open, inclusive, balanced, and beneficial to all, and to fully unleash the vitality of the global economy. There is a common understanding that to steer the world economy from crisis to recovery, it is imperative to strengthen macro policy coordination. Major economies should see the world as a single community, apply systems thinking, increase policy transparency and information sharing, and coordinate the objectives, intensity, and pace of fiscal and monetary policies so as to prevent the world economy from faltering again. Major developed countries should adopt responsible economic policies, manage policy spillovers, and avoid severe impacts on developing countries. International economic and financial institutions should play a constructive role to build global consensus, enhance policy synergy, and prevent systemic risks. Third, we need to bridge the development divide and revitalize global development. The process of global development is suffering from severe disruption, exacerbating prominent problems such as a widening north-south gap, diverging recovery trajectories, development fault lines, and a technological divide. The Human Development Index has declined for the first time in 30 years. The world's poor population has increased by more than 100 million. Nearly 80 million people live in hunger. Difficulties are mounting in food security, education, employment, medicine, health, and other areas critical to people's well-being. Some developing countries have fallen back into poverty and instability due to the pandemic. Many in developing countries are also experiencing difficulties. Whatever difficulties may come our way, we must adhere to a people-centered philosophy of development, place development and people's well-being front and center in global macro policies, realize the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and build greater synergy among existing mechanisms of development cooperation to promote balanced development worldwide. We should uphold the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, promote international cooperation on climate change in the context of development, and follow up on the outcomes of COP26 of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Developed economies should take the lead in honoring their emissions reduction responsibilities, deliver on their commitments to financial and technological support, and create the necessary conditions for developing countries to address climate change and achieve sustainable development. Last year, I proposed a global development initiative at the UN General Assembly to draw international attention to the pressing challenges faced by developing countries. The initiative is a public good open to the whole world, designed to form synergy with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to boost common development across the world. China stands ready to work with all partners to translate the initiative into concrete actions and to make sure that no country is left behind in this process. Fourth, we need to discard the Cold War mentality and seek peaceful coexistence and win-win outcomes. Our world today is far from tranquil. Rhetoric that stokes hatred and prejudice is widespread. The resultant acts of containment, suppression, or confrontation do harm to all. They do not in any way advance world peace and security. History has proved time and again that confrontation does not solve problems. It only invites catastrophic consequences. Protectionism and unilateralism can protect no one. They ultimately hurt one's own interests as well as damaging the interests of others. Even worse are the practice of hegemony and the strong abusing the weak, which run counter to the tide of history. It is inevitable that countries will experience differences of opinion and disagreements, but a zero-sum approach that seeks to enlarge one's own gain at the expense of others will not help. Stubbornly creating walled-in courtyards or parallel systems, zealously putting together exclusive circles or blocks that polarize the world, overstretching the concept of national security to hold back economic and technological progress in other countries, fanning ideological antagonism, and politicizing or weaponizing economic, scientific, and technological issues. All of these will gravely undermine international efforts to tackle common challenges. The right way forward for humanity is peaceful development and win-win cooperation. Different countries and civilizations can prosper together on the basis of mutual respect and seek common ground and win-win outcomes by setting aside differences. We should follow the trend of history, work for a stable international order, champion the common values of humanity, and build a global community of shared future. We should choose dialogue over confrontation and inclusiveness over exclusion, and we should take a stand against all forms of unilateralism, protectionism, hegemonism, and power politics. End of section 19.